We may, as Krishna says, seek liberation. We may even meditate. But now Sri Krishna tells us that's not enough. As Yogananda ji says, attitude is everything. Yogananda ji would tell the story of an orphaned baby lion who was adopted by a flock of sheep. And it grows up thinking that it's a sheep. It even bleated like a sheep. Until one day another lion comes along. And he shows this young lion, he brings him to a pond and shows him his reflection. And he sees a lion. And he begins to roar like a lion. And he reclaims his true identity. And we are like that lion. At first, we don't realize that our nature is joy. And through the ego, through Maya, we're constantly reminded of what's wrong, our faults, our mistakes, until we learn to purify the heart, as Sri Krishna tells us, of all attachment and limitation. Swami Kriyananda says, the scriptures declare that heavenly happiness in God is our divine birthright. But we must diligently, unsparingly, and with deep attention remove egoism and self-seeking from our hearts if we would find the Lord's presence reflected there. And Swamiji says something else intriguing. He says that in the astral world after death, whatever we continue to experience, whatever state of consciousness we experienced during our life, and even more so, if in this world a person loved God, he was kind to other people, then in the astral world he would experience great joy. If, on the other hand, a person was selfish, then in the astral world he may find himself alone and without external avenues for his worldly desires. He would feel fear and he would suffer. When I was a kid, I dabbled in learning tennis, and for me, I sort of enjoyed hitting the ball against a wall, because I could control that situation. But then the coach would come by and he would start hitting balls to me from every different direction, and it was just so difficult. But I knew that was the only way that I could grow. And very often life is like that as well, that it takes courage, it takes discipline to love heroically under pressure, if that is what's needed, instead of closing in on our little self. There is a cartoon that sums up this sentiment as well. And it has the image of a person praying to God. And the person says, I really, really want to grow spiritually, but not if it involves anything unpleasant or painful or embarrassing. That would be too much. And sometimes, however, that is the only way forward. And every time we make a mistake, we pick ourselves up and we keep on going. When we practice Hong Sa, we know that thoughts are going to come. And when they do, we simply gently bring the mind back to that one point of concentration. A once a close disciple of Yoganandaji, left the ashram and lived a more worldly life for several years. And then she came back. And another disciple said, how can you dare to show your face in this place? You know, the way after leaving us like this? And she had a very wise response. She said, do you want me to worship my mistakes? No, we have to pick ourselves up and just go on, not worship our past, worship our mistakes, allow those feelings of guilt or shame or blame to circulate in our minds. We just have to keep on going with joy and with positive energy. Amesha Yukteswar said, forget the past. Human behavior is ever unreliable until anchored in the divine. Yoganandaji buried his guru's body under the sands of Puri, and then some weeks later, when he was in Mumbai, his guru came to him in a resurrected new body. And Yoganandaji touched that body and he hugged him. And Sri Yukteswar would describe the wonders of the spiritual state where he was staying at that time in Hiranyaloka. And he said to Yoganandaji, he said, tell everybody that this joy is also for them, that everybody can experience it. It is our true nature. We were born to that destiny. And God knows this. He knows our true nature is joy. And He's always supportive of our desire for change, whatever it is. If your dearest friend were to tell you that they were going to plan to transform their life in a certain way, how would you respond? Would you say, I don't believe it, you're going to fall back again into that old habit, I've seen it 100 times. And you may think that, but you wouldn't say that to them. You would be supportive in whatever way you possibly could. And this is the way that God always is with us, always forgiving. He wipes the slate clean of the past if we're ready to start a new future today. It's ever fresh and ever new in the mind of God. And this joy that we can experience, we experience within. It's already within. Once the author, George Bernard Shaw, was at a party, and he was sitting alone in the corner, and his hostess said, "Aren't you enjoying yourself?" And he had a witty response. He said, "That's all I am enjoying." And ultimately, really, that's all any of us can enjoy is the inner self. That gives us the capacity to enjoy other things. We can enjoy the beauty of a painting because we have that inner ability, that inner ability to see beauty. If a turtle were to see that same painting, he wouldn't see beauty. Maybe he would wonder if it was good to eat. And Yoganandaji tells us how to invite that joy, that divine consciousness into our lives in Whispers from Eternity, in this prayer. And he says, "O Father, from joy I came, for joy I live. In joy I will melt again. Thou art sacred, perennial joy. Thou art the joy I seek. Thou art the everlasting joy of the soul. Teach me to worship Thee through the joy born of meditation. Balance my worship with good action, and teach me to shun all false pleasures which, siren-like, call to me through my misguided senses.
Keshava just read some of Master's poem, the very segment of Master's poem out of Samadhi. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt. And, you know, the Masters tell us this, that this is, we've come from Satchidananda, that spirit is that ever-conscious, ever-existing, ever-new bliss. And we are made in that image. So we are made in the image of bliss, and we want to believe them. We want to believe that we are perfect. Christ said, "You are perfect. Don't you know that God has told you this? Don't your scriptures say that?" Scriptures from all over the world say that we are born perfect as God's image. And yet, we don't always feel that that is true. And can we say with honesty in our heart, like, do we believe that? That's scripture. These are the great masters telling us that, but it is not my daily experience. And what can I do to make that my daily experience? The birds of the air, they fly. The trees sway in the wind. The animals run around and bark and chase, and they seem to all be doing what they are meant to be doing. But am I doing what I'm meant to be doing? And so that's a lot of the spiritual path is introspection. You know, what am I doing here on this planet? Why was I born? And so when we ask ourselves those questions, especially as devotees, you know, we have a lot of hints that the scriptures and the masters have told us, but we must introspect on our own lives. You know, am I fulfilling my purpose here? And what is my purpose? We know theoretically what it's supposed to be, but what is it really for me? And so that's why Master says we should journal. That's why we should take days of seclusion. That's why we should go on retreat, because we need this time that we're not just sitting in traffic, going to work, doing our jobs, coming home, having food, being with our families. We need times of introspection, saying, who am I really and what am I looking for in this lifetime? And, you know, I think we all fall somewhere along the spectrum of, you know, who am I? I am this body. I am these senses. This is how I experience the world. This room looks very solid to me. The harmonium looks solid. The camera, the people here, we all look very material to me. I think I live in a material world. And if somebody bangs me on the head, I hurt. So I'm a material being and I hurt when I get banged on the head. And most of us, probably our day-to-day life, that's pretty much where we live. And so there's the spectrum of I'm just a body and everything I understand comes through me through my five senses. Or at the higher end of the spectrum is I am spirit. I have come from God. I'm having a temporary lesson here in the material world, but actually, truly, I am spirit. And then, you know, and I'm a part of all that is. And if I do anything wrong or hurt somebody by judging them or hitting them, that I'm actually hitting myself and judging myself, because I am one with all that is. I'm one with everything. Or on the other hand, if I'm just matter, I'm separate from everybody. And all I care about is myself. And all the decisions and attitudes and actions that I make in my life will reinforce that thing, like, I need to look out for myself. And if you remember Swami Kriyananda's Festival of Light, the little bird says, what else is wisdom but to keep what I have for myself? And then somewhere else in the Festival of Light it says, let's celebrate our greater reality for you are a part of all that is. So the spiritual path is making that transition, that evolution from sometimes thinking we're separate and we're just matter, and really our true reality for eternity and in every moment is that we are that Satchidananda, we are that spirit, and we are joy, we are love, we are peace, we are the vibration of Om. We are everything that the masters have said we are. And in faith, we believe them. And in love, we try to practice the teachings to prove that it's true. Because if they say it's true and they say you really want to experience that, this is how you experience it. You meditate. You practice the yams and niyams. You overcome the likes and dislikes of the heart. You get over your attachments and your desires. You know, your true self will bubble forth if you are able to do these disciplines. That affirmation we just said, self-control, will give us that centeredness, because only in that centeredness can we discover the joy of the soul. You know, if we're living on the periphery of our body or just on the fringes of our senses and our body, we can never experience the lasting fulfillment and joy of the soul. We may have temporary pleasures. Master says in this quote, he says, when immortals behave like mortals, they experience the changes of joy, sorrow, and indifference in their natures. When you find your own nature of unchangeable joy, you will be able to enjoy everything, either pleasant or disagreeable, with your unchangeable, indestructible joy. Your joy will stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking pleasures. Last weekend we had a spiritual retreat in Rishikesh. Several, maybe 26 of us went. And it was a beautiful retreat above the Ganga, and we meditated in Vashishta Gufa. We had yoga, long yoga and meditation sessions twice a day. We had journaling sessions. We sort of had guided introspection. We took dips in the Holy Ganga. We did all of these practices every day, and every day built just deeper and deeper. One day was in total silence. And you know, by the end of those 3 or 4 days, our consciousness was so much higher than we had left Delhi with. And it goes to show that Master's dictum, environment is stronger than willpower, because we were all much more joyful, more experiencing our true selves as Satchidananda than we were at the beginning of this trip. And yet, there was one gentleman on the trip that said the last time he was in Rishikesh, all he wanted to do was go rafting and try to find a place where he could drink beer. And this time, he could not believe the transformation and what more joy, what sort of a lasting transformation that he felt within, having gone through this retreat. And of course, he'd also been meditating. There'd been some years in between that he'd been evolving on the spiritual path. But having us all here this morning, it reminds us how important environment is. This pandemic has kept us all apart for a very, very long time. And I think for many of us, it's because we haven't had necessarily the environment of satsang. Maybe perhaps we've become less strong in our center, maybe a little more insecure about my spiritual path. Am I really, on the right track? Am I meditating correctly? It's not as easy without the group, and also my joy level. I've become so much more concerned about my health and my finances and my family and all these things. And once we come back together again, it's almost as if, I remember what it's like to be with my spiritual family. I know that I'm feeling that way. Many of you know that at the end of last year, I went back to California to be with my mother because my stepfather had died. And I experienced this environment is stronger than willpower, and I realized how blessed I am to live in the ashram surrounded by devotees, because 3 months with my mother was was not the same environment that I was used to, and I definitely felt that my consciousness was no longer as centered as when I left Delhi. And also I just found myself, digressing along that spectrum, thinking I'm definitely a body, I'm definitely affected by things that people say to me and do to me, and and I was so concerned with the results, with the fruits of my actions. I was so concerned with the fruits of my actions that my poor mother, really, people think that I live in this ashram in India all this time, that I would be more evolved, but no, I really fell backwards a little bit there. And just to say, as Keshava was saying in his, we do take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And Divine Mother and the Gurus, they don't expect us to already be perfect, but they expect us to be sincere in trying. And really that's what we need to do. Be sincere in trying. Do the best we can in every moment. And Asha Nayaswami said it something, try to do better than your worst. And if we're doing better than our worst, then we must be moving in the right direction. So she used to say, what quality of God can you express right now? If it can't be joy, can you express at least calmness? Or if you can't express calmness, can you at least express energy? So just find, what can I express right now? And on our better days, we can express joy, love, energy, the vibration of Om, and we can just be the channels of the masters. This coming together in satsang, coming together as spiritual family, helps us to celebrate what we're doing with our lives, helps us to strengthen our resolution that I am seeking to be a channel of God's love, of His light, of His joy to my family, to my colleagues, to everybody around me. And coming together helps us become firm in that resolve. And the masters have told us, satsang is so important. Environment is stronger than willpower. And seva, serving the gurus in any way you can, whether it's here at the ashram or with your friends, with your people at work. How can you be a channel of Master's love and of Master's joy and peace? Just think about it, introspect. How can I be a channel today? And then at the end of the evening, was I that channel? And introspection is everything. If we're sincerely trying to understand what our life is about, every morning we should say, am I going to move forward in becoming a channel of joy, of peace, of love today? And if so, how can I do it? Nayaswami Anandi, she was a founding member of Ananda Village with Swami Kriyananda back in 1970. She passed away recently, and this morning, our time, yesterday in the evening, America time, was her celebration of life. And one of the things Nayaswami Devi said was that when something happens to one of us in the spiritual family, it sort of happens to all of us. Because, we've been, those of us that are disciples of Yogananda Ji, we've been in this spiritual family for a long time. And we all sort of learn our lessons. When a child is born within the family, we all rejoice. When somebody's facing a hard time and an obstacle, we all sort of feel that obstacle and we all work on it together. And when somebody passes away within our family, we all feel a little bit closer to the astral world. And one of the persons speaking today said that they were meditating outside of Anandi's house just before she made her transition, and that she just had a very real vision where Anandi was sitting next to her and saying, I'll always be here, I'll always be serving with you here, just as you'll continue to serve, I will continue to serve wherever I am. And Jivani said that she just felt her awareness expand to the gates of the astral world and just felt that that joy that we always think somehow is outside of ourselves. Just that understanding that joy is always within, and that is our true birthright. Master said in the astral world, we remember more and more who we are, that our reality comes from within. So, Anandi led a victorious life. She became a saint in all of the service that she did for thousands of people through, 5 decades. And all of us are on that same track, actually. As disciples of Master, as serving his work, as sharing his love and his wisdom. That's the destiny for all of us. And, if we can remain in our center and tune into that joy, then as we just said in this quote, amongst the crash of breaking worlds, we can remain even-minded and cheerful, as Krishna tells us also, to remain even-minded and cheerful through everything. And this is really all that's asked of us, is, get over your reactions, stay in your center, be an example for others, and come together in seva, in satsang, in service, in attunement to God and our gurus, and more we can experience the reality of our true self.